Elon Musk just did something extraordinary and dangerous. He publicly connected Donald Trump to Jeffrey Epstein in a way that implicates the sitting president in a relationship the DOJ never fully investigated. This isn't a tweet. This is a billionaire with government contracts dropping evidence that should have triggered federal action years ago. Here's what prosecutors see when they look at this: witness statements, timeline corroboration, and a pattern of concealment. And the silence from the Justice Department, that tells you everything. Let's be clear about what happened. Musk released details, photos, flight logs, timeline overlap, connecting Trump to Epstein during periods that were never part of any federal investigation into Epstein's trafficking network. We're talking about evidence that existed before the 2019 indictment, before Epstein's death, before the Southern District of New York closed its inquiry into co-conspirators. From a prosecutor's perspective, this raises one critical question: why wasn't this pursued? The Epstein case was handled by career prosecutors at SDNY, some of the best in the country. They had subpoena power, they had cooperating witnesses, they had financial records, and yet certain names never appeared in charging documents. Now think about this timeline. Epstein dies in August 2019. The investigation into his associates continues for months. Ghislaine Maxwell gets indicted in July 2020. But by then, Trump is president. He controls the executive branch. He appoints the attorney general. You see where this goes. Here's what Musk is doing, whether he intends it or not. He's creating a public record that prosecutors can't ignore forever. When you have a witness with direct knowledge making specific factual claims about a sitting president's connection to a federal sex trafficking conspiracy, that's not punditry, that's evidence. And evidence doesn't expire just because an investigation went quiet. Let me explain how federal prosecutors would evaluate this. First, credibility. Musk has access to records most people don't. He runs companies with security clearances. He's not some anonymous source. Second, corroboration. Flight logs are documents, photographs are physical evidence. If these exist, they can be authenticated. Third, relevance. If Trump had knowledge of Epstein's activities and continued associating with him, that goes to consciousness of guilt. Now, I'm not saying Trump committed a crime. I'm saying Musk just created a prosecutorial roadmap that any competent U.S. attorney would recognize. But here's the problem. Trump is president again. He controls the DOJ. He's already fired independent-minded prosecutors. He's installing loyalists in key positions. So the question isn't whether this evidence matters. The question is whether anyone with prosecutorial authority will touch it. Here's what they're not telling you. The Epstein case was never just about Epstein. It was about a network, a system, powerful men who enabled, participated in, or covered up a decades-long trafficking operation. And the federal government made a choice repeatedly not to expose that entire system. In 2008, Epstein got a sweetheart deal from federal prosecutors in Florida. Non-prosecution agreement, sealed records, minimal jail time. That deal was orchestrated by Alexander Acosta, who later became Trump's labor secretary. Coincidence? From a prosecutor's perspective, there's no such thing. Fast forward to 2019. Epstein is rearrested. This time, SDNY has him. The case is solid. Then he dies. And the investigation into co-conspirators slows down dramatically. Maxwell gets convicted in 2021, but the government never names other participants. The client list stays sealed. Now Musk drops this information, and suddenly we're asking, who made the decision to limit the scope of that investigation? Because here's what prosecutors know. When you have a conspiracy this large, you flip witnesses. You grant immunity to lower-level players to get to the top. But if the people at the top control the Justice Department, the whole mechanism breaks down. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's institutional reality. Let me walk you through what federal prosecutors would do with this information if they were operating independently. Step 1, verify the flight logs. The FAA keeps records. Private aviation companies keep manifests. If Musk has documents showing Trump on Epstein's plane, those can be cross-referenced with official databases. Step 2, interview witnesses, pilots, staff, anyone who was present during the time periods in question. Under 18 U.S.C. Part 1591, the federal sex trafficking statute, you don't have to personally commit the abuse. If you knowingly benefited from or participated in a venture that involved trafficking, that's exposure. Step 3, examine financial records. Did Trump and Epstein have business dealings? Were there payments, investments, or loans that would explain the relationship? Because here's the thing, when you're building a conspiracy case, you need to show agreement and participation. You need to prove people knew what was happening and chose to engage anyway. Musk's disclosure potentially provides the timeline and the context. Now, would this lead to charges? Not necessarily. Statute of limitations is a real issue. Most of Epstein's conduct occurred years ago. The clock may have run out on many potential charges, but, and this is critical, there's no statute of limitations on covering up a crime. If anyone lied to federal investigators, obstructed justice, or conspired to conceal evidence, those are separate offenses, and those offenses can be charged today. Let's talk about historical precedent. In the 1990s, prosecutors went after organized crime figures who had been untouchable for decades. Why? Because they finally had witnesses willing to testify. In the 2000s, the Enron prosecutions showed that powerful executives could be held accountable when the evidence was clear and the political will existed. In both cases, what mattered wasn't just the evidence, it was whether prosecutors had the independence to pursue it. Right now, we don't have that independence. This is bigger than one case. What Musk just did, intentionally or not, is expose the fundamental weakness of our system when the person under scrutiny controls the mechanism of accountability. Think about what this means for the rule of law. If a sitting president can be credibly connected to a federal sex trafficking conspiracy and the Justice Department takes no action, what does that say about equal justice? If evidence exists, but prosecutors are too afraid or too compromised to pursue it, what does that say about institutional integrity? From a prosecutor's perspective, this is the nightmare scenario. You have potential evidence of serious federal crimes. You have a witness making public statements. You have a legal framework that should trigger an investigation. But the person implicated controls the investigators. That's not a democracy. That's an autocracy with legal window dressing. Now, here's what happens next. Musk's statements will either be ignored, which tells you the system is broken, or they'll be aggressively contested, which tells you they're true. Watch how the White House responds. If they dismiss this as baseless, ask yourself, why not release the records? Why not cooperate with an independent review? If they attack Musk personally, that's a tell. Prosecutors know that when you can't refute the evidence, you attack the witness. And if they do nothing, that's the most damning response of all. Because silence in the face of specific factual allegations is, in a courtroom, often treated as an admission. The long-term consequence here is this. We're establishing a precedent that presidents are above investigation. Not above the law in theory. We'll still talk about accountability and norms, but above the law in practice. And once that precedent is set, it's almost impossible to reverse. Here's the bottom line. Elon Musk just handed prosecutors a case if they have the courage to pursue it. The evidence is public. The legal framework exists. The only question is whether the system still functions when power is implicated. I've spent my career inside the Justice Department. I know what happens when prosecutors have independence and what happens when they don't. Right now, we're seeing what happens when they don't. Pay attention to this. Watch who investigates and who looks away. Because the rule of law isn't some abstract principle. It's the difference between a republic and a kingdom. Stay informed. More accountability and truth coming.